What's up, everybody? This is Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HawgSports.com. Today we're going to be joined by Patrick Brown from Vols, Go Vols 247. We're also going to be joined by Danny West, of course, and Kurt Wilkerson as we prepare you for this Arkansas versus Tennessee game on Saturday. We're going to get to your questions as well. This is your Arkansas versus Tennessee primer. Before we get started, I want to remind you there's plenty of ways to watch and listen. You can always tune in on Facebook Live. If you haven't followed the page, go ahead and do so now. Throw us a like if you like the videos that we do. Also available on YouTube. Be sure to throw us a like there. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Hit the notifications bell so you're notified anytime we upload new videos. Also on Apple Podcasts, throw us a 5-star rating and leave a review if you like the content as well so people can know what to expect when they tune into HawgSports Live. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, everywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. If you haven't signed up for our HawgSports newsletter, now's a great time to do so. We'll deliver breaking news to your email inbox as well as free articles every single morning around 9 a.m. Usually send about 8 articles. 75% of those are free, clearly marked VIP if it's not free. So a great way to stay up with the Hogs by getting our daily newsletter. You can also get breaking news text alerts just by going to HawgSports. To sign up, both those to go up to the top right of the page, you'll see 3 bars, maybe 3 dots if you're on mobile, and you can bring it down. You'll see where to sign up for text alerts and your newsletter. It takes 15 seconds. All you have to do is enter your number, and you can cancel anytime if you don't like it. We're not going to spam you with a bunch of stuff or anything like that. So you're going to like that. You're going to like staying on top of things before all your friends do. Also, HawgSports is $1 right now for your first month at HawgSports.com, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. Great time to sign up. All right, all that out of the way. Let's go ahead and dive into this thing. Reminder to get your questions in. Try to limit the comments if you can. Kind of hard to sift through everything. First, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. Amonte Spivey has entered the transfer portal. Redshirt freshman running back out of Phoenix City, Alabama. Picked Arkansas over Ole Miss in the recruiting process. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe he was rooming with Jerry Jacobs, who's also opted out. So 2 opt-outs in the last 3 weeks. Jacobs actually a little bit before everybody knew about it. And I guess from the same roommates. I don't know if that's 100%, but that's what sources have told me. It's never good to lose a player. I will say this about running backs. I've always felt either you can run or you can't, and running backs typically play early in their career, and the fact that he hasn't, I don't know. I mean, kick anybody on their way out. I'm not a big fan of quitting in the middle of the season. I don't know what his circumstances are. Maybe it's an opt-out decision. I don't know, but I'm not a big fan of quitting in the middle of the season. So, wish you well. It's unfortunate. I will say again, usually running backs come in and play as freshmen. You can't name a running back before the 4-game redshirt rule anyway, who came to Arkansas and redshirted, not because of an injury, and went on to have like a really successful career at Arkansas. The only guy that somebody might bring up, they might bring up Michael Smith, who did redshirt, but he had hamstring issues, and Michael Smith went on to run for 1,000 yards one season as a junior. So he might be the only guy, but again, it was an injury for the reason that he redshirted. You can't find, usually, I mean, running backs probably you get stronger, you can get faster, all this stuff, but really, and that's true at every position. But running backs, to me, had the shortest distance to go. Their ceiling usually isn't that high, and you're not usually like, this guy has a lot of potential. Usually it's like you can run or you can't run. You got to get better at pass pro. That's it, really. So hopefully he finds what he's looking for. So just a little bit of information on this game coming up. Obviously, both teams are 2-3. November 7th, 6:30 p.m., SEC Network. Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Be about 16,500 in there, 76,000 capacity. Weather's supposed to be okay. 71 degrees at kickoff. It's been a night. I mean, it's warm outside right now. Like last week, I wondered if that might have impacted Arkansas in their preparation, having to practice indoors every day. This week, this has not been a problem. I mean, it's been like 70-something every day. Of course, they didn't practice Tuesday because of election. That's nationwide. I want to get into this roster real quick for Tennessee before we get to Patrick here in about 10 minutes or so. Really, when I look at this group, I mean, I don't see like a huge difference from, like how they were rated as recruits versus what Arkansas's roster is, except this offensive line. And I'm sure some of you guys have heard, people talking about the offensive line, 5-star offensive line. When they say 5-star offensive line, like 5-star, like 4 5-stars on this offensive line that are starting and 1 4-star. They're 6'5", 320 across the front. The centers goes about 6'3", 300, so he brings it down a little bit. So the other guys are a little bit bigger. But Cade Mays, you guys remember him. We talked a little bit about him possibly transferring to Arkansas. He's the one that, had the dad whose finger was severed. Sam Pittman puts it in a bag. But he was at the University of Georgia. Pittman actually lured him from Knoxville Catholic in Tennessee to go to Georgia. But he was a 5-star recruit. He's actually replacing Jerome Cabin, who's a 4-star who was injured. So he's actually replaced him. But he's a 5-star at right guard. Left guard, Trey Smith, 5-star recruit, number 14 overall prospect in the country. Wayne Morris, 6'5", 320, number 28 overall prospect in the country, class of 2019, started 12 games last year, 5-star. He's had an ankle, I believe an ankle injury, but has had 2 weeks to get back. Darnell Wright at right tackle, 6'6", 320, number 10 overall prospect in 2019. So they got a couple of tackles who are 2019 prospects, 5-star recruits. Pretty solid group. Everybody but the center is like 6'5", 6'6", 320, 330. So pretty loaded up group. Now, if you look at the rest of of Tennessee's offense, I mean, there's some talented guys, obviously, but it's not like, they've been recruiting at a pretty high level. But I guess maybe some 3-stars here and there beat some guys out. Eric Gray, everybody knows, I think he's really good back, 5'10", 205. And Ty Chandler, who's the other one. Both those guys were 4-star recruits. Chandler's a senior. Gray is a sophomore. And then at quarterback, Jarrett Garantano, who was a 4-star prospect in the class of 2016, been very up and down, hot and cold type of quarterback. We could possibly also see Brian Maurer, who was a 3-star out of Florida. Josh Palmer at Tennessee, mid-range 3-star guy, 836 in the country. Brandon Johnson, another wide receiver, mid-range 3-star guy, 500, high-end 3-star guy, I would say. Ramel Keaton is a 4-star, 111 prospect in the country. Princeton Fant at tight end is a 3-star, mid-range 3-star type of guy. Again, this is just recruiting stuff. I think it's fun to just go back and look at recruiting stuff. We'll get some more information from Patrick Brown on these guys more specifically, but I always like looking back at that kind of stuff. We talked about the offensive line, obviously, but that's pretty much their skill guys. So it doesn't like just jump out from a recruiting standpoint like any different than what Arkansas is rolling out there. Defensively, Matthew Butler was a 3-star recruit, higher end 3-star. Latrell Bumpus was the other defensive end. He's also, a mid-range, high-end 3-star. Aubrey Solomon at defensive tackle, the nose, 6'5", 315. Really highly regarded guy, number 23 overall prospect in the country and a 5-star. He's the only 5-star on defense. And then you get to the outside. So they base out of a 3-4, 6'3", 255, DeAndre Johnson, 3-star, mid-range, low-end 3-star. Kevin Bennett, not sure if I'm saying that right. High-end, mid-range 3-star, the other outside linebacker. And then you get to the inside linebacker, Quavarius Crouch, 4-star, number 61 overall prospect, highly regarded guy. Henry Toe, I don't know if I'm saying that wrong, right. Inside linebacker, another 4-star. So the two inside linebackers are highly regarded guys coming out of high school. And then at cornerback, 4-star, number 122 nationally, Alontae Taylor. Bryce Thompson, the other cornerback, another 4-star. Safety, Sean Schamberger, 3-star, low-end 3-star. Jalen McCullough, 4-star safety. And then Traven Flowers, 3-star. So, I mean, like I could go through and compare, like, what Arkansas's lineup looks like. They've got just one 4-star on the offensive line. So that's really the biggest difference to me. Like when you look at how highly regarded that offensive line, but you look at Arkansas's offense, Traylon Burks is a 4-star, Felipe Franks, Rakeem Boyd, Hayden, Hudson Henry as a 4-star. Defensive line, you've got some pretty highly regarded guys on the defensive line that, weren't 4-stars, but were, higher end 3-star types. Some really well-regarded junior college players. You've got some others like, Zach Williams, Matayo Soli. I'm forgetting the other. Eric Gregory. Those are all 4-stars, 4-star recruits. Bumper Pool at linebacker is a 4-star recruit. Monteric Brown, 4-star. Jalen Catalon, 4-star. So you've got some guys, that are kind of comparable throughout the defense in terms of how they were rated. So it's an interesting matchup, but obviously from a recruiting standpoint, Tennessee offensive line, very impressive. We went behind enemy lines, and we're going to go over that. I always call that story behind enemy lines 5 questions with Tennessee beat writer. So we'll go over that with Patrick here in a moment. I always say, there's certain things that are constant to me when you talk about keys to victory, and people always come up with all these different keys to victories. But I always say penalties, turnovers, special teams play, injuries, all very key. Those 4 are always going to be constant. And I would also say, the 5th would probably be just capitalizing on mistakes. I feel like I've said that more this year than I ever have, capitalizing on opponent mistakes. When they make a mistake, you make them pay 100%. The worst possible outcome for them is what needs to happen. And the team that does that and the team that limits mistakes usually ends up winning. So those are the keys to victory. Curtis does this story. I love it. It came out today. 5 burning questions where the Hogs set the tone with a fast start. They did last time. They don't know if they set the tone, but they got off to a fast start. Texas A&M punted. After 4 plays, Arkansas scored a touchdown. And then Arkansas couldn't stop them until the 4th quarter. So that's a big one, returning at home. The previous 4 games, Arkansas went 3 and out each time. Can Arkansas get pressure on the quarterback? Arkansas's defensive line is good. I don't think that they have I think they have an SEC defensive line, I should say. Okay, Tennessee's offensive line is very good. It's interesting because you look at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is regarded by most maybe as having the best offensive line in the SEC. 5 returning starters. Okay, 4 seniors. But Texas A&M's offensive line isn't like super highly regarded. There's 1 5-star guard, but everybody else is like a 3-star. Tennessee, on the other hand, very, very highly regarded. Not as veteran as the group for Texas A&M, but very highly regarded recruits all the way across. So can Arkansas get pressure on the quarterback? Can there be a bounce-back game for the secondary, and that means getting interceptions? Obviously, losing Jalen Catalon was catastrophic for them in the secondary. He's, in my opinion, again, their best player on defense. Is Rakeem Boyd here to stay? Another good question. 100 yards, first time this season. Can he keep it going against Tennessee? And then how will things shake out on the offensive line for Arkansas? That's his 5 burning questions. All right, everybody, I want to go flip the page over here to Patrick. He does a great job for the Go Vols 24/7 site. If you're a Tennessee fan watching, go check them out. They do a great job over there, just like all of our sites in the SEC. See what Patrick has to say.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Patrick, that's my line. That's actually my call sign is hey, guys. I do that every day on the radio show. Patrick, I want to welcome you to HawgSports Live. I just gave you a glowing introduction, the Go Vols 24/7 senior writer, and you do a great job over there. And I just want to kind of jump into it here. We asked you some questions. I always call it the Behind Enemy Lines feature, so we're not going to stray too far from that for our listeners here. But Tennessee's coming off a bye week, okay? And we know that there have been some injuries. Can you just kind of fill the listeners in with the latest with Tennessee injuries, maybe who we could expect back, who's been out?
Yeah, Trey. Most of Tennessee's injuries have been on the offensive line. They've had a couple of starters that have been missing games there. Jerome Carvin is a right guard who really hasn't played in the past 3 games. He's had a turf toe issue. He's probably, if we're going by NFL terms, probably questionable for Saturday. Wande Morris is their starting left tackle. Didn't play against Alabama due to an ankle injury. He's probably questionable as well. They have some other guys that have missed some games and have come back, and so I think they've started 4 different lineup combinations on the offensive line in 5 games this season. So there's been some kind of shuffling going on there. Defensively, probably the main injury is to Jeremy Banks, a linebacker. Has a high ankle sprain that he suffered against Kentucky. He didn't play against Alabama. He's practiced a little bit this week, and might be able to give him something. He's not a starter, but he was rotating in and playing quite a bit before he got hurt. Mm-hmm. So both Carvin and Banks are guys that they held out last week of practice just to get them some more health and give them some more time to get healthy. Mm-hmm. And Tennessee, like a lot of teams, they got some guys playing less than 100%. Both their starting cornerbacks are dealing with injuries. I think Bryce Thompson has a torn pec. Jeremy Pruitt said last week, and then Alontae Taylor has missed a game with a hamstring injury. So, but that's probably common for a lot of people. But
Bryce Thompson's playing with a torn pectoral.
Yeah, that's what Pruitt said. I think Thompson was limited in the Missouri game, which was the second week of the season. Mm-hmm. Really only played on third downs, and he said he got hurt in practice. And then I think Pruitt kind of said last week that he had a torn pec. He's been playing. I think he's been doing okay. Their secondary sort of been a little bit of a disappointment this season, but he apparently is getting it out, and so are a few other guys that have some injuries that they're playing through.
That must really suck for Tennessee to have to put a 5-star player at right guard in place of Carvin and Cade Mays. And Cade Mays is a familiar name around here because a lot of people thought that he may end up at Arkansas because of Sam Pittman connection coming from Georgia, but obviously ended up at Tennessee, played at Knoxville Catholic, so that makes a lot of sense. But at the left tackle spot, if Morris can't go, is it Johnson that would fill in there?
Yeah, it would be Jameer Johnson. He started the South Carolina game, but hurt his ankle in that one and didn't play until the Alabama game when he started. So the only 2 games that both Morris and Johnson were healthy, they rotated. So if they're both available, I think that could be something that they do on Saturday. Johnson's probably better in pass protection. Morris brings a little bit more of the run game, so there's a little bit of a trade-off depending on who's in the game. But I would think if Morris is healthy, he would probably get the nod.
It must be real difficult on you guys predicting things like, who's going to, like how scores are going to play out, because at quarterback it's just been so inconsistent for a while now. What do you expect to get out of Garantano? Am I saying that right? Garantano? I've heard it said so many times, so many different ways.
You're saying it right, and it's hard to know what to expect on a week-to-week basis, and it's been really – the quarterback situation has been a really frustrating point for Tennessee fans, really, for, even go back to last season when they, I think, like Arkansas, they started 4 different guys at quarterback last season. But, Garantano you look at his numbers, career numbers, I mean, his interception rate is lower than Josh Dobbs and even going back to Tyler Bray at Tennessee. Both those guys had higher, 3 interceptions more frequently than Garantano does, but Garantano has this tendency to make these catastrophic plays. I mean, you go back to the Alabama game last year, he didn't have a great game when they lost to Georgia State to open last season. You had the 2 pick sixes against Kentucky, and, but 3 games this season he hasn't had a turnover, 3 out of 5. So that's like the baseline for him. If they can get a turnover-free game from him, I think Tennessee would probably take it and live with whatever else happens. But, you just never know what to expect with him, and really, the whole team has been really inconsistent this season. Tennessee will have on both sides of the ball, just about every position group, they'll have 3 and 4 plays in a row where they look pretty good, and then they have a 5th play where it's just they have a penalty or they give up a big play with a busted coverage or whatever. So he's sort of a microcosm of the whole team, and just that he's kind of unpredictable and kind of inconsistent, and will do good things but then undo them all with a bad play. And the quarterback situation has been a real frustration point for Tennessee fans, and I'm sure probably for the coaching staff as well. I think a lot of Tennessee fans think that Tennessee, if they had a better quarterback or a more settled situation, would be a considerably better team. I think they have more issues than that, but certainly that's an easy position to point to. And your coaches all the time say that when teams are doing well, quarterbacks probably get more credit than they should, and when things are going bad, they get more blame than they should. That's just kind of how the position is. But it's you never know which one which Garantano is going to show up, and obviously he has to play well for Tennessee to win games.
Patrick Brown joining us from GoVols 24/7, senior writer there, does a great job. Again, if you're a Tennessee fan, go check them out. I'm curious also, Patrick, because Tennessee's just it's such a weird team to figure out, and this is to me a big measuring stick game for Arkansas. Being back at home and playing pretty well, especially compared to recent seasons. But I look at Tennessee, and I'm sure Tennessee fans hate when I say this, but I look at those last 6 games last year, no ranked opponents, first 2 games this year not ranked. Is there a bit of like fool's gold with Tennessee, or the fans totally buying in on that? And obviously, the last 3 games have not gone their way. So what is the pulse of Vol Nation right now?
Well, I think they're frustrated. They're frustrated by the quarterback situation. They're still angry about the Kentucky game. I mean, that's the difference, really. If they're 3-2 right now, and even if they had lost by the margins they lost to against Alabama and Georgia, I don't think there would be maybe the angst that there is.
Yeah.
That Kentucky game really kind of soured things because Kentucky hadn't won in Knoxville since 1984, and I don't think Kentucky is particularly a great football team. I mean, the next week they went out and really didn't do anything and lost to Missouri. So. Yeah,
I mean, a word of advice: don't have 4 straight turnovers early in the game and 2 pick sixes.
Yeah, I mean that's that was the issue of that game, is they just imploded at the quarterback position, and I mean they didn't even really Kentucky didn't even win that game as much as Tennessee just gave it away. I mean, it was I think Kentucky in the first half had like 4 first downs. They had under 100 yards of offense. They were up 17-0. That's because of those turnovers, and when Tennessee wasn't turning the ball over, they were moving it. They had 2 drives that got into Kentucky territory inside the 30, and then had, they had a bust up front where they got tackled for loss and a sack, knocked them out of field goal range, and then they had a fumble where Garantano was throwing an RPO out where they were going to get 10 yards because Kentucky wasn't even ready, and they had more numbers out there on that side, and the running back stepped forward thinking he was going to get the ball and knock the ball out of quarterback's hands, and just a kind of a stupid mistake like that, and then they compounded it with the 2 pick sixes, and then the other turn after that. So, was that the aberration? We've seen Tennessee kind of have the Georgia State game and the BYU game last season were really bad in the moment, but I think they kind of at the end of the season they kind of look more like a fluke than anything. But I wonder which version of Tennessee is going to show up on Saturday night. Right? I mean. You look at the first 2 games; they look competent. They look well coached. Didn't turn the ball over. Limited penalties. They found a way to win against South Carolina, which was kind of in line with the games they won last season. They didn't really blow any of those teams out. Missouri, Kentucky. They beat Vanderbilt comfortably, but South Carolina they pulled away in the second half of that game last season. But a couple of those games they had to grind it out in the second half and sort of just kind of found a way to win. They did the same thing against South Carolina open this season, and against Missouri, it's really businesslike. They ran the ball well. They played good defense in that game, and did what they needed to do to win pretty comfortably. But then, these past 3 games, and when you play Georgia and Alabama, they're going to make you look like you have a long list of issues. That's just how those 2 teams are.
It's so sudden in all those games, though. You know, it's like the Georgia game, it's 23-21, and then suddenly it's 44-21. And Alabama happened a lot earlier. And Alabama does that to teams. But I want to get you out with one last question. I'm not going to ask you how you see this one playing out just because, like you said, Tennessee's been just one team and another. It's been 2 different teams. But just this simple question is Tennessee wins if?
I think Tennessee wins if they play a clean game and sort of limit their mistakes. We know about Arkansas. You guys know about Arkansas's turnover advantage. They've had some big turnover games that have led to those wins. Tennessee, obviously, in the past 10 quarters, I think has 8 turnovers, and they've given away 37 points from those turnovers. 4 of them were defensive touchdowns, and on the other 3 field goals accounting for the rest of those points, the other team only picked up 2 first downs on those drives. So they're pretty much turning it over right around the red zone, and it's an easy field goal even if you don't even gain any yards. So Tennessee can't turn the ball over, and they have to limit, I think, their penalties too. They've been a little penalty prone the last 3 games. And some other things that they haven't done well. They've been pretty bad on third down, both offense and defense. I know Arkansas has been pretty good on third down defense. So can Tennessee find a way to extend drives? That's something they haven't done the past 3 games. And also, I think it also comes down to red zone scoring. I mean, this could be a pretty close game, and scoring opportunities may be limited for both sides. Or who knows? I mean, it could turn into a shootout. I don't know that would surprise me either. But if scoring opportunities are going to be limited in this game, whoever can, when they get those chances, can hit their field goals, and if they get chances to score touchdowns and can convert those opportunities, then this could be big differences in what could be a close game. A lot of people see it as a close game.
All right, Patrick. I appreciate the time, man.
All right, thanks, Trey.
All right, appreciate you, Patrick. That's Patrick Brown with, again, Go Vols 247 senior writer. If you're a Tennessee fan, go check those guys out. Do a great job. All right, we're going to switch gears over here. We're going to bring in my man Curtis Wilkerson. Curtis does also a great job for us at HawgSports.com and been with us for a few months, and basketball season's about to kick off, and can't wait to see how he covers that. Hey, Curtis, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. Right before you called me, I actually just got a notification that the SEC is going to be releasing the conference basketball schedule tomorrow at noon, so I'm excited about that.
You know how many DMs I get? Like, what's the basketball schedule? Like, I'm like, just give it a minute. Just give it a minute.
Patience.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know Curtis, you can follow him at Kurt Wilkerson _. We might need to change that underscore, Curtis. Might need to get you like a 247 at the end of that if you can't find your own.
Maybe, yeah. The problem when I made the change was I ran out of available characters. I guess I got a long last name.
I've never run into that issue. I guess I've always been Trey Biddy on there,
Right.
But anyway, Curtis really does a great job covering basketball, and you guys are going to see that. He has a background with prep hoops and busting brackets before we brought him over here. Has also coached and served in administration, and a former player on the NAIA level. And hey, Curtis, what else have you done? You've been in sports medicine. I mean, you've done just about everything that you could do in sports now. So we're certainly glad to have you part of the team. Before we get to any basketball stuff, let's talk a little bit of football. You do your 5 keys to victory and 5 burning questions. I kind of went over a little bit that, but let's go with this first one. Well, the Hogs set the tone with a fast start. Obviously, Arkansas did that in the Texas A&M game, but didn't continue. They didn't set the tone with it, unfortunately, for Arkansas. But before that, it's been 1 3 and out after another.
Yeah, that's true. It was nice to see, and the defense got a stop there to get things started against A&M. And then, it was just a really impressive drive down the field for a touchdown there. It was nice to see. And obviously you want to see a continuation of that just to get off to a hot start at home. And then, you look at a team like Tennessee, who came into the season with a lot of expectations, obviously, won their first couple ball games. And then really the last 3 games, especially the last 10 quarters, I mean, they've really struggled. So you got to think if Arkansas can come out and land the first punch, it might demoralize those guys a little bit. So I do think that's going to be a big part of the game.
Yeah, I think it is too. And obviously turnovers, all those things. But getting to the quarterback is going to be big too. And Tennessee's offensive line, we talked about them. They got 4 starters. 4 guys are projected to start unless they get their 4-star starter back, Carvin, in place of Cade Mays. But what do you see in this one? What's Tennessee giving up in terms of sacks and things like that and pressures on the quarterback? Can Arkansas rattle him?
Yeah, I mean, the guy you had on earlier was talking about some of the shuffling they've been doing with injuries and things like that. And I guess we'll see who's going to be back on the field on that offensive line for Tennessee. Now, you went through the roster, and that's a really, really talented group. There's no doubt about it. But I don't know that I'm ready to put them on the quite the same pedestal as that Texas A&M offensive line. I mean, right. Kellen Mond had all day back there, and that's more of a testament to how good that offensive line is. So while it's not going to be an easy task by any means for Arkansas to get pressure on Garantano or whoever they wind up having back there at quarterback, I do think that they're going to have a little bit better of a chance for some success there Jonathan Marshall's been incredible. I saw the graphic where he's in the top 5 in the country in quarterback hurries. So you have to feel good about his chances to be disruptive in there. And then, Coach Pittman has talked about Julius Coates really coming on strong the last couple of games. Dorian Gerald is getting healthy. He got a cup of coffee in there last week, so maybe he can build off of that and get into the rotation a little bit more. So I do feel encouraged that they're going to have a little bit more success against Tennessee, and I think that's going to be key in terms of putting a little bit of heat on those quarterbacks and maybe being able to force some turnovers, which Arkansas has thrived off of in their wins so far this year.
They really need to get a couple pops on Garantano early and rattle him. I think that'll go a long way. And you're right. I mean, like Tennessee's offensive line is very highly regarded, but like the 2 tackles, for example, 5 stars, but they're class of 2019 guys. So they're definitely a bit on the younger side, whereas Texas A&M was certainly veteran. I bring this up all the time, but I just think back to this Justin Fields breakdown they were doing on ESPN this time, and I know I've told this story like 3 times, but it just always amazed me. Like they're talking about how he goes through his first progression, his second, his third, fourth, fifth, and I'm just thinking, I'm just sitting there like looking at the pocket he's throwing in, and there's nobody even close to him. He's got like forever, 6 seconds to throw the ball, and they're talking about how poised he looks. Yeah, he looks poised, and that's kind of the same thing that we saw with Kellen Mond. So it'll be interesting to see if Tennessee can protect Garantano in a similar way that Mond did, and conversely Arkansas. I mean, Tennessee's got some talent up front. Those outside linebackers are very talented. They can get to the quarterback. So Arkansas is going to have to make sure they protect Felipe. They don't need to give up 4 sacks. I mean, his jersey doesn't need to have a bunch of grass stains. Of course, it'd be in red this time versus white. It makes it amplified when you see a bunch of grass stains all over your quarterback's shoulders and back and stuff. But yeah. So Curtis, Rakeem Boyd obviously got going finally. He looks like he's finally healthy. Getting him going would be big. Also, Traylon Smith, having that 1-2 punch would be really good. So, how do you see them being able to run against that Tennessee defense?
Yeah, I found some really interesting stats. I thought on the rush defense for Tennessee. You take a look at it, and they're giving up quite a bit of yardage per game. I want to say it's about 153, 163 maybe. So that kind of ranks towards the bottom of the SEC, 9th or 10th. So on the surface, you look at it and you say, okay, Arkansas should be able to have some success here. But then you dig a little bit deeper and you notice that teams are averaging over 40 attempts on the ground against Tennessee per game. So they're actually only giving up 3.7 yards per carry, which ranks at near the top of the SEC. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see a disparity between, the total yards allowed and then what they're actually giving up per carry. Now, that Texas A&M defense, they were, stout in terms of SEC standings and in the country when it comes to stopping the run. And, Rakeem Boyd, he's the type of back who it almost doesn't even matter, who the defense is. If he's on top of his game, he's going to be able to gain some yards. In a sense, it doesn't necessarily matter if he's on top of his game, who's blocking for him, because you saw what he did the last couple of years with a much less talented or organized offensive line, I guess you could say. So, we got a chance to talk to Rakeem last night on Zoom. He was excited, fired up, and quite honestly relieved to be able to have, a healthy, little bit of a breakout game. And, he says that there's more to come, and I tend to believe that. I think he's going to have a nice game back there. You mentioned Traylon Smith. Really nice 1-2 combination. I like what Traylon Smith is able to do as a pass catcher out of the backfield. Would like to see a little bit more of that from him as well.
It's nice to have another back there to play in tandem with Boyd now that both of those guys are healthy. Arkansas just hasn't seemed to have that, or have 2 backs that are healthy at the same time. I want to change gears with you real quick before I let you go. And again, people, if you haven't followed Curtis Wilkerson at Kurt Wilkerson _, you're going to want to do that. Okay. You're going to want it. Basketball season is near, and it's not just football coverage. You're going to love what you get out of Curtis in basketball. We've got some surprises also for how we're going to cover basketball this year with Curtis. But changing gears obviously over to basketball, 24/7 Sports just updated the 2022 top 247, and several Arkansas recruits moved up. One guy couple guys moved up significantly. One guy really moved up. So if you just kind of run down what to look for in that 22 class in the state of Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much hype about this in-state group, and it's really starting to show in these rankings. First of all, Arkansas did gain their first commitment in that 2022 class from Joseph Pinion, 6'6" wing out of Morrilton. He actually stayed pretty steady, moved up from number 150 to 144 in the top 247, just outside the top 100 in the composite. The thing to keep in mind with Joseph, he did have a knee injury towards the end of his high school season. Wasn't able to compete in any of the events over the summer. Now he's back, and reports are that he's looking as explosive as ever, but there just really wasn't an evaluation opportunity there. So for the people that see all these other guys jumping up really high and seeing Pinion kind of leveled off, I'd caution you to wait maybe until the next update and see what happens with him. But three guys who made significant jumps: Darion Ford, the 6'4" combo guard out of Magnolia. He jumped up 34 spots to number 52 overall prospect in the nation. Khalil Ware, really impressive and intriguing prospect. He's one of those 6'11", versatile type of forwards that can step out and shoot it a little bit. He can run the floor. This guy jumped from number 100 all the way up to number 32 in the country. So he's a high four-star recruit at this point, one of the top 5 centers in the country. Right there in your backyard in North Little Rock. And then Nick Smith Jr. out of Sylvan Hills, another 6'4" guard. He moved up several spots as well. He's up to number 25 overall in the country. That puts him one spot away from 5-star status. So 4 really, really talented players in that group.
All right, Kurt. Appreciate you, man.
Hey, anytime.
All right, that's Curtis Wilkerson. Again, Curtis does a great job with us, and then wait till basketball season starts and SEC schedule getting released here soon. All right, we're going to change gears now to our main recruiting guy, Danny West. You can follow Danny West 1 on Twitter. And Danny's been with me for over a decade and longer than that, just as a contributor on the site, back in the days of Rivals.
Trey Biddy.
What's up, Danny? Just giving you another glowing introduction.
Yeah, you got to quit all that. All my buddies make fun of me for it.
It's true, man. Top recruiting guy in the business, not just in Arkansas, but all over the country. So
I appreciate it anyway.
So, Danny, I was wondering, just before we jump into some talk about this Tennessee game, maybe you can update us on the latest happenings with Razorback recruiting.
Yeah, sure. A couple of offers to speak of. I want to start with the 2021 class. That's what everybody cares about right now, right? How they're going to finish this thing out. Obviously, as we talked about last week, most of my focus is on the defensive line. I think they've got a couple of spots there that they'd like to fill. 2, maybe even 3 if you get the right 3. So put out a new offer earlier this week, Marcus Bradley. He's a defensive tackle, 6'3", 280-ish, somewhere in there. He's a kid out of Maryland. Gaithersburg, Maryland, Trey, and he's a 4-star guy. He had been committed to the Terrapins up there in Maryland and been committed for several months, and then on November 2nd, he backed off that commitment. So he's wide open to everybody, and, you hear things here and there. Arkansas may have a decent shot at this guy. So obviously with the lack of visit opportunities, that probably hurts you. But, if things were to open back up with first of the year, maybe you get them on campus. If not, do as many of these virtual visits as possible. But he's a big-time guy. I think the composite has him at number 175 overall in the country. Number 12, the defensive tackle, is pretty salty, right? So keep an eye on Marcus Bradley out of Maryland. Then a couple of 22 offers. Trey Emery is another defensive tackle out of Mount Pleasant, Texas. I think he's going to be a big-time guy, as well as DJ, don't want to mess up the name here, but Wesolak out of
Oh, you nailed it, Danny.
Yeah, thank you.
You just nailed it.
I've been practicing all morning for that. I put in work. DJ Wesolak, he's a kid out of Boonville, Missouri, 2022, defensive end, 6'5", 225. He's also got Duke and Iowa State, Iowa, and Boston College. So you're in there pretty early on that guy.
Arkansas and Tennessee have had some recruiting battles, Danny. You noted in a recent article. Can you go over some of the highlights with some of those guys?
Well, some of them were low lights, Trey.
Yeah.
About this time last year, they had a couple of low lights.
Low light is what is the word? Understatement. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, most people remember the trio out of Memphis. We're talking about Martavius French, Bryson Eason, and Tamarian McDonald.
Mm-hmm.
I could spend the rest of your show talking about what a show that was, right? Mm-hmm. So, obviously, you had Martavius committed at the time, and then had all three of them in here for a visit. We won't get into specifics about that, but things didn't go well for anybody involved. So, basically kind of parted ways depending on who you ask. Some people say the trio just kind of played Arkansas and said, a few days later, we're all going to Tennessee. So, some interesting storylines with that group in particular. But, you think about guys like Darren Turner and Trey Knox. Arkansas went in there under Chad Morris and pulled out some four-star type guys that had Tennessee offers at the time. A couple of them even visited Tennessee. Think about Ray Curry Jr., Marcus Henderson, that Sam Pittman got both of those guys late in the class last year. And then, of course, so many of them went to Tennessee that were really close with Arkansas at one point. The running back, Eric Gray, I remember at one time, correct me if I'm wrong, don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think we both agreed Eric Gray was the best running back they were on last year, if you recall. And Jabari Small, Omari Thomas, so many guys we spent months talking about. So quite a few familiar faces were this time around.
All right, Danny, I'm going to get you out with one quick question here. Just how do you see this one playing out? What do you think is going to happen in the game Saturday?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat every time somebody asks me this, but it comes down to third down again this week. Their offense is struggling, 106th in the country on third downs. And up until last week, Arkansas had been pretty good at defending third downs, right? But I want to leave you with a stat here, Trey, that blew my mind. On third and short to third and medium, we're talking about 1 to 6 yards to gain. Garantano is only hitting 41% in those situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you make it third and long, so that's 3rd and 7 and beyond, even over 10 yards, he's hitting 73%. He's hit 7 out of 8 on 3rd and 10 or longer. So that just blows me away. You almost don't want to put him in 3rd and long. You want that joker in 3rd and short. So interesting stuff there. But I think, to answer your question in a brief matter, I think Arkansas wins the game. I like Arkansas at home in spite of Tennessee's bye week. I think Arkansas is better on third downs. They finally found some offense. Tennessee's got the edge in special teams by a wide margin, but I like Arkansas at home.
Just based on what we know of Jarrett Garantano, that seems like the most Jarrett Garantano stat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it.
All right, Danny. All right, Danny. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for hopping on.
All right.
That's Danny West again. If you haven't followed Danny, it's Danny West 1. We got to get a 247 on the back of both of these guys' names, but Danny West does a great job covering recruiting and also obviously providing insight, finding interesting stats. Does a great job participating in the message boards as well. So one more reason to sign up for HawgSports.com, which, by the way, is 30% off right now for an annual subscription or just $1 for your first year. So if you haven't signed up at HawgSports.com, now's a good time to do so. We're going to get to your questions now. I'm going to run through this one more time, though. If you haven't followed the page on Facebook on Facebook, then go ahead and do so. If you haven't thrown us a like on YouTube, then do that also. Interact with the video, both of those places. Subscribe to the channels, hit the notifications bell so you're notified on YouTube anytime we upload a new video. Throw us that 5-star review if you haven't done so on Apple Podcasts yet. Just take a minute, throw us a 5-star rating, throw us a review. Also available on Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere else you can think of to find your favorite podcast. Sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the free text alerts. You can go to the top right of the page. Take you 15 seconds to do each one of those. You will get an activation email on the newsletter, but you're going to want to do that. It's a lot of free content, a lot of breaking news stuff. I mean, we don't always send we're not going to flood you with breaking news stuff, right? But Monte Spivey interest transfer portal, you're going to get notified of that. So it's handy to have, especially if you like being on top of things for your buddies on your group thread. Okay, we're going to go ahead and dive into questions here. We're going to start over on the Razor's Edge VIP forum on HawgSports.com. Number one Razorback message board, number one Razorback VIP message board, one of the top VIP message boards in the entire country. Will the run game build off last Saturday's performance, says Hogzilla? I think so. I think you finally got Rakeem Boyd going. I don't know that Tennessee is quite as stout as Texas A&M was last week, but the running game definitely got going. And if they can continue to get yardage out of Felipe Franks, then absolutely. Chase Nightcrawler says, hey, Trey, with Amonte Spivey being done, do you think our recruit Rocket Sanders will be able to pick up the slack? I don't know where Rocket Sanders is going to play. Somebody made a good point on here that he kind of runs a lot like Nile Davis, kind of that hard forward, stiff lean that Nile had. Very fast, very big. You don't just get named Rocket Sanders for no reason. You got to be fast to have a name like that. But it's possible. He could end up at wide receiver, linebacker, running back. Who knows? Just get him here. WPS 1987 says, I know we have a two-headed monster at running back. Do you see any meaningful touches for Dominic Johnson down the stretch? It's possible. Dominic Johnson's thighs are about as big as my waist. I mean, he's just got a huge pair of legs on him. And so I could see roles for him. I don't know if he's a guy that you put in aside from short yardage situations, but yeah, you really need three quality running backs in this conference. Losing Spivey, I mean, that's tough because, he's a guy that, been on campus for a couple years. So you go from, those two guys straight to a true freshman. And Arkansas has some help coming on next year with Javion Hunt and A.J. Green also. Hogzilla says, have you felt about typical in-game coaching decisions this year? Overall, pretty good. I mean, I will admit the fourth down at midfield where they ended up throwing the 36-yarder to Traylon Burks, I was just thinking, the game's not on the line. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you throwing deep? And they did it anyway. But, for the most part, I didn't like the way they ended the Auburn game. That would be my one, I do not like that, I felt like you needed to be playing like if Auburn gets the ball back, they're going to win. So it's not a situation where you're trying to take the clock down to 2 minutes and make them burn all their timeouts because it doesn't. If they have 2 minutes, that's more than enough time in this day and age. So that's the one thing that stood out to me. It's hard to say that's a stupid call. Why are they making that play call? Because that's the easy thing to say after it doesn't work. I haven't liked some of the times where they maybe go for it instead of taking their medicine and getting a field goal, some of those things like that. And I can understand it's 4th and 1 stuff. But the thing I really didn't like was that Auburn game. But aside from that, you're going to have complaints. I don't expect anybody to make perfect calls time and time again. But to me, at the end of the game, when it's close like that, it's 2 points? What was it? Was it 2 points? 1 point? I can't remember, but it was all they need is a field goal, and you're going to give them 2 minutes and the ball back. You got to throw the ball. You got to make plays that are going to keep the ball in your hands. And if they'd done that, then they would have won the game, and it wouldn't have been left up to the referees to make a colossal error. Idiots. Chase Nightcrawler, based not on this staff's past, but solely what they've been able to accomplish with the recruits so far. How do you feel confident they are meeting this team's needs? Feels like they are. Let's look at it. Let's take a quick look at this recruiting class. So right now, they're ranked 22 nationally. Keytron Jackson's a big get at wide receiver. A.J. Green, big get at running back. They need both of those guys. Terry Wells is a 4-star on some services. He's not on the composite. Also got Javion Hunt at running back, so that's done well. So they got Terry Wells committed at offensive line. They've got Cole Carson as a guy that might be a guard, right tackle type. Another good-looking prospect. Also Devon Manuel. You can't teach 6'8", 300. He's a guy that doesn't have a lot of football in his background. Not a really highly regarded guy. There are some people who think that Lucas Coley at quarterback is going to be a really good player in the future, that he's really underrated. Landon Rogers, guy that has a lot of tools, maybe more of a project. We've talked about Raheem Sanders, who could play a lot of different positions. If you talk about having Raheem Sanders, Bryce Stevens, Ketron Jackson at wide receiver. That's a pretty good group. Jaden Wilson. Forgot about Jaden Wilson. Another tall, lanky guy. So on offense, it feels like they've hit some pretty important areas. Keywan Parker at cornerback. I mean, it's pretty spread out if you think about it. Solomon Wright at defensive tackle. Could use another defensive tackle. Maybe the ball kid would be good. Marco Avant, one of my favorite recruits in the class, is a real good kid. Sent me a happy birthday. I hadn't even ever really communicated with with Marco in person, and he sent me a happy birthday. I think Danny West said he did something nice, so that always stuff jumps out to me. Aaron Outley at tight end. Of course, they need help at tight end. Got a notable guy. Turned down Florida State to go to Arkansas. Chris Paul, Marco Avant, we talked about at linebacker. Chase Lowry's another cornerback. And they got Cameron Little on board at kicker, and they need a kicker. So feels like they've done pretty well. They got 20 commitments right now, if you include Jaqueline Crawford. Seattle Seahawk says, I hear a lot of people going back and forth about Scott Fountain. Is he really overrated, or is there just big death? I mean, we got to have a bigger sample size. I mean, obviously for his career, he has done a really good job as a special teams coordinator. That has not been the case at Arkansas. Arkansas special teams have been below average to bad in games. They have not had a great special teams effort. They've had special teams efforts where they didn't, it didn't hurt them. It hasn't been a weapon yet, and that's kind of what I think we were looking for, be a weapon. So I don't know that it really hurt them in Texas A&M, aside from missing the field goals, which I think one of those might have got blocked. I don't know if you can put that entirely on Scott Fountain for missing field goals, but I mean, so far, they've gone through 3 different putters. It looks like they've settled on Reed Brower, so they didn't have the punter situation ironed out, going into the season. They've changed holders also. Hasn't been, great for Fountain, but you got to look at the whole body of work. His body of work says he's a great special teams coordinator. At Arkansas, it just hasn't happened yet. And, again, part of that could be just impacted. Every team's impacted differently from COVID, and maybe that's what Arkansas has. RPT says, surely Spivey opting out doesn't mean anything for Boyd's future at Arkansas. I'd take that trade, though. Oh, you're talking about returning for a senior year. I don't think that's going to happen for Boyd. I mean, running backs typically worried about their mileage and how much tread they got left on the tire. Him coming back this year, I think, was a huge bonus for Arkansas. I mean, it hasn't really proven out to be yet because he's been injured, and they ran into Georgia in the opener. How do you feel our offense against Tennessee and defense? Is there anything? Is there still an early signing period for football? There is an early signing period, Hog Wild 13. I think the defense matches up pretty well against them. I don't want to talk too negatively of Garantano because I don't want to jinx anything with him. But he's just been very hot and cold. You don't know who you're going to get, and it all comes down to that. On the other side, with Arkansas's offense against Tennessee's defense, I think they match up pretty well. Hog Nation 9 says, can you count how many times Rakeem Boyd said, you know what I mean? Everybody's got a crutch that they go to. Warren 96 Hog says, do you think we have a better chance of winning a defensive battle where hopefully our defense can do the same thing Kentucky did? I think they got a chance. If it's a defensive battle, I think they got a chance. Yes. A shootout, who knows? If they got a shootout, then that means Garantano's having a good game, and he's good, Garantano. Hog Wild 13, so I'd say maybe defensive. Hog Wild 13 says, is there anybody will be missing this week, injury-related? Pittman said yesterday on his radio show there's 1 or 2 guys. I didn't see anybody come off the field in the Texas A&M game. We're going to pop over to our Facebook questions. Got a few that I picked out. I don't see yours, Savage. I know you called in on drive time asking why I didn't read your questions, but I didn't see any questions from you. Boz Burr says, do you think they can get Warren going in this game with Burks? He didn't get going till late. I mean, he had a nice catch late in the game against Texas A&M, but yeah, they need to get him going. I'm gonna dip down here to let's see. I thought we had another question about Trey Knox from somebody, but yeah, they got to get Trey Knox going too. I mean, I get that he's moved down to the second team, but he's not getting targeted or anything, not even getting opportunities. So that's just a weird situation because we know what Knox is capable of. We saw him early as a freshman doing really strong things, but it just hasn't gotten going for him. Maybe it's an injury that they're just not talking about. But that would be nice to get him going. Mike Woods has been I don't want to say a surprise, but I think he's been playing better than people expected him to play. Warren also. I mean, Warren hasn't had a whole lot happening in his career, and he's definitely having his best season. Might be a guy to look at to come back next year too. Cody Hudgens says, do you think our defense will have a big bounce back, or did Texas A&M give everybody the blueprint to beat our defense? I mean, the blueprint to beat any defense is to protect the quarterback. If you protect the quarterback, then, and in this conference, most guys are going to pick you apart. So that's the blueprint, really. I mean, Mond is a senior veteran quarterback. I felt like he was as on as he's ever been. He got great protection. They got a strong running back. Texas A&M's got a good team. They're pretty polished. I mean, the only negative that I saw really in their team is they had 9 penalties for 100 yards. Jonathan Mosley says, Trey, is the game we finally put all the pieces together on offense and defense. I've said before, this is a very big measuring stick game. I feel like Arkansas's offense has been getting better and better. I do think that they face the best opponent that they faced so far, probably outside of Georgia in terms of defense. So it's possible they return home. It feels like they're going to be pretty healthy. The offense is starting to click a little bit more. Defense has gotten healthier. It's possible that they put it together. It's a big measuring stick game. That is the key term for me in this one. Nathan Espinoza says, Trey, who is more critical to a win this weekend, Franks, Boyd, or Burks? Franks. Franks has a good game, then Arkansas has a good chance to win. I mean, it's obviously possible that, Boyd doesn't have a good game, but maybe Traylon does. Or Burks doesn't, they just all eyes on Burks. That's possible too. And somebody else steps up. So I definitely think it's Franks. I think it's Franks. That's what I said. I think it's Franks. Ryan D. Summer says, with Spivey opting to transfer, what do we know about Johnson at running back? I touched on that in another question. I've heard he's a big physical back, but haven't seen him play and hope he stays. Yeah, we kind of touched on that, Ryan. Josh Garr says, anybody see Nick Starkles last week's? Makes me wonder what he was doing for us. I always thought it was interesting that the more comfortable that Nick Starkle got in Chad Morris's offense, the worse he became. Like going from very promising against Ole Miss, like, hey, they got a quarterback. All right. To a complete and utter disaster against San Jose State, which is where he's at right now. He had 4 touchdown passes in the last game, 4 or 5. Kirk Herbstreit named him as one of his top 10 performers last week. So, I mean, that just makes me think that maybe it wasn't a Nick Starkle issue. It was maybe a Chad Morris issue. I mean, has a quarterback played well under Morris? No. Sam Kerr says, yeah, there's the Trey Knox question. Can we not get Trey Knox involved? So I answered that. I can't figure out how we can't get him going in the red zone target. He's 6'5". I agree. I mean, he did have a drop on a 2-point conversion play, had another drop. I guess that was the Auburn game. But it just seems like after that game, it's just kind of been, I don't want to say abandoned, but he'll have his moment, I'm sure. I'm sure he's just too talented. It doesn't make any sense, All right, everybody. We've gone almost an hour. I can feel it in my throat. Everybody knows my threshold is about 50 minutes of straight talking. So I want to thank Patrick Brown for joining us from Go Vols 24/7. Again, if you're a Tennessee fan, go check those guys out. And if you're a subscriber at 24/7 Sports at HawgSports.com, you can go check out opposing teams' message boards. I always think that's really entertaining, especially, after a team loses a big game or something happens where there's a controversy or, it's an opponent. Go check out their message board. You get to do that on all the VIP message boards throughout the network. You may not be able to post, but you can post some, but I think you're limited on how much you can get involved and stuff. And they're usually a quick trigger on if you're coming over there with a flamethrower. But it is fun to go around and look at what other opposing teams are saying on the 24/7 Sports Network. Again, it's just $1 to sign up. $1, $1. Go sign up if you haven't done so. And if you're not going to sign up, then do me this favor. Go to Apple, iTunes, podcast, Go to podcast. iTunes doesn't exist anymore. Don't go to iTunes. But go to Apple Podcast and throw us that 5-star rating and let people know what they can expect out of the show, if you don't mind. Would appreciate it. Throw us a thumbs up on Facebook. Throw us a thumbs up on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends about it. Grassroots it for us. All right, everybody. Next time I'll be talking to you guys, I'll be exiting Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium for the walk and talk, so be sure to tune in for that. I'll try to get to it as soon as I can after the game versus, spending more time in the press box, see if we can get to it a little bit earlier since it has been so popular, kind of warrants maybe a little bit earlier exit. So we'll try to do that. Again, it's not going to be like right after the game. It'll be after press conferences and all that stuff. So, all right. Thanks, Patrick Brown, for joining us from Go Vols 24/7. Thanks, Danny West, for his recruiting insight on football and his takes on the game, and Curtis Wilkerson, of course, for his takes on basketball, recruiting, the team, and as well as the game on Saturday. Again, you guys are really going to like some of the stuff we have planned for Curtis Wilkerson when it comes to basketball season. All right, that's it. We've done it. This has been your Arkansas versus Texas A&M primer. Spend the rest of your time at HawgSports.com on the day if you're not watching election coverage, and we'll catch you after the game. It's been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. We'll see you next time.